I'd like to call to order, please, the regular meeting and work session, on October 6, 2014, 5 p.m. Just a little information. There's a regular meeting this evening and a special meeting tonight after the work session. So you're going to have a long night, sort of. Okay, I just want to give you that good news right now. All right, as I look around the table, we're all here except Councilman Stipp, and Bill will be somewhat late, so he'll just join the discussion when he gets here. So we have one item on tonight's work session agenda, and boy, is it thick, huh? Yeah, okay. We'll receive an update on the first year city staff, the city's performance measurement program. We've got Kristen Williams, Executive Management Assistant, Christine Ines, Executive Assistant, Wynette Reed, Deputy City Manager, and they're all going to present this to us. It's yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here today to give you an update on our year of city stat. We came here about a year ago to inform you that we were embarking on our performance measure system, our performance measure program. So we're here to bring you some results from it and take you through how to read the report. So in preparing to get all of our performance measures together, it took a lot of hard work from a lot of people. And we have nearly half of our team here tonight, so I just wanted to pause and recognize some of them that are here. If they could stand up.
Stand up, stand up.
We have representation from every department in the 3 major divisions within the city, and a lot of hard work goes into this, so we really appreciate all the hard work of the team.
Okay, I get the pleasure of taking you back a little ways. When we first started with the strategic action plan, you'll recognize the little icons down below. We see them often. One of the things the council was very interested in with the strategic focus is when we embarked on the performance measures was there we go, was to make sure that we had transparency with this, that it fostered a climate of innovation, that we were really using the performance measures to help us in our planning and our budgeting efforts. So those were some of the strategic focus areas that council, when we began this process, asked us to focus on, and I think we've done a very good job. Christian and his team have worked very hard on all of those strategic focus areas. And this next graphic, I know you see a lot, but it really is something that we want to kind of revisit often because it is our performance management program. It is coming together here at the city. And the performance measures is one piece of this program. We have the general plan, which is going out to the vote here in November, and that really drives a lot of the strategic action initiatives that we work on in our strategic action plan. From there, the departments develop their operation and strategic plans, and then we allocate resources based on the priority-based budgeting. From there, we have the employee performance and the performance measures. Employee performance, we just revamped that whole performance evaluation process and system. So that's one way of evaluating, are our employees actually aligned and meeting those objectives all the way up through the general plan. The other piece to this is the performance measures, and it's just as critical because as you'll hear us say, what gets measured, you've heard the old saying, what gets measured gets done. And we want to make sure that we're aligning all of this and that we are measuring how effective we are in accomplishing the strategic actions and the objectives. So it's all starting to come together, all of the pieces, and this is one of the final pieces to this whole program.
Joe?
Just one question there, Wynette. We do our surveys every couple of years on the citizens of where their priorities are and what they services. What's the process internally that you go at to look at the actual rating systems that we have versus the actual request of what the citizens want us to provide? You go through a process just to check to make sure how we're rating them is aligning to what the citizens are asking for.
And that's done through the strategic action plan. So when we look at, what the survey comes back with, that's part of our, decision making, and what we bring forth to council also is a consideration with that. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I
the
just want to
survey?
make sure that, because that could be every evolving, of what they're looking for out there in the community. And this is based on where we're putting our money and our priorities. So I guess overall, at some point, we match up with what our citizens are asking us for versus what we're measuring and where we're putting our efforts.
A good example is the citizens' more education and, more higher education or more education. And in our strategic action plan, that's an action that we have that we're working on. So all of that is tied back through the strategic action plan that goes down into the department operating and strategic plans. And then we allocate resources based on that through the PBB.
Yeah, and I think there's value in that, letting our citizens know that this isn't just something in a vacuum. It's driven by a lot of things, and their input is a significant piece of that. That's kind of the point I wanted to try to drive home in our discussion.
I think he's looking, what's in it for me as a citizen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mayor and
Yeah, Brian?
Vice Mayor, if I may, the other part of it is absolutely what Lynette was talking about, but it drives our capital improvement plan. So specific to what came out of the citizen survey, top 3 items, one was higher education, but the other ones were more parks and more recreational programs. So specific to the parks, that is now in the CIP. And, so there is funding it's part of the 10-year CIP, and we're looking at, obviously, at a park in Central Goodyear. But that does feed into not only the capital improvement plan, but the whole budget process and priority-based budgeting. So it all gets vetted by the council.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm on a roll here, but in our performance measures, with the parks and that we have performance measures that actually look at how our parks are performing. And so it does continue that loop there that we show on that graphic. And like I said, it's all starting to come together.
Yeah, and I guess the point, and I kind of knew what the answer was going to be, but for the general public itself, to hear that is it's important when they get surveys and et cetera out there, the public, to make sure they fill out and send it back in, because it's driving a lot of things. We just don't set it on the side. We use that to drive a variety of capital projects or operations. So, and again, I just wanted to tie it all back in. We're doing this for the service levels out there to the public. So thank you.
Good point. There are 5 key elements that in the development of our performance measurement system that we really wanted to focus on, and that was to adopt a culture of performance. And we're doing that with the performance management program. We are having those conversations when we have our performance evaluations, when we look at our strategic action plan, when we do PBB. We are adopting here at the City of Goodyear a culture of performance. And I mentioned before, what gets measured gets done, and so we need a clear understanding not only of what we're measuring, but why we're measuring it. And Christian's going to talk a little bit more about how we developed the measures and why we chose the ones we did choose. And then we will talk a little bit also about how we're benchmarking ourselves against other communities through the Valley Benchmarking Group that we belong to, and have been meeting with them for over a year, and looking forward to the second year. So we'll talk a little bit more about how we are actually using some of this information and benchmarking ourselves against other organizations within the Valley. And last, a key element is that these don't just come in and we don't do anything with the information, that we don't just put it in a spreadsheet and then we're done. We need to analyze it, evaluate it, and discuss it. And we're beginning to do that on a quarterly basis, and we'll ramp that up in our second year of implementation. So I do want to kind of say, I went to ICMA and they had a breakout session on performance measures, and it was very interesting how other cities have approached this. And other cities have taken up to 6 years to put together performance measures and really identify what a good number is. And I think Christian and his group they've done a really good job at coming back with good performance measures, but it will be a continual process where we will work to improve that.
It's kind of a living document.
Yes.
That's basically what's going to happen.
We will continue to refine those and get better at what we're measuring, and then have those key performance measures that we really want to focus on. So, performance measure methodology. A year ago when Susan and Elaine and John were here, they walked through the methodology of how we were going to develop the performance measures, and we went through each and every one of these squares on here, from council support. Your support was very important to us, the education of staff, and how we would identify performance measures. So we're kind of at the end, but we're kind of looping back here. And for that middle column there, it says future years adjust and refine as appropriate. As I mentioned before, we are adjusting and we are continuing to refine. So when you hear that we have 196 performance measures, next year we may not have that many. Maybe we'll have a few more, but we really want to make sure we're measuring what we need to measure. And there's a direct connection, back to what Vice Mayor Pizzillo said, to what the citizens are asking for, and that we are showing that we are being as efficient and effective as we can be.
So in order to create a document that flowed well throughout the departments, we wanted to make a design that was comprehensive and spoke to multiple audiences. Whether that be council that's reading this document, whether it be directors having discussions with their staff members, their team members, or whether it be employees talking about how to improve performance. We wanted to make a document that was easy to read across all areas and could speak to the audiences. And we wanted to make sure that there was multiple types of measures. So we went with a statement of service approach, and that is providing the why are we delving into this question? What is driving these decisions? So we start with the who. We go to what are we doing for citizens? What are we doing for customers? What's our workload? What can we handle? We're answering those questions within this. So it's answering that so what question. And again, we wanted to have a balance of measures, which will show you the different types of measures we have on this next coming slide. It's a couple slides away, but so before you have a nice chunky document, but it's again, it has multiple ways of reading the data, so you can take what you want from it, and if you don't want to take it home tonight for your midnight read, we'll take it back to City Hall for you if you need us to do that.
That's what that is.
That's what this
That's
is,
what
yes.
it's in here.
I
The
just
whole
saw
year.
fourth quarter. Oh, okay.
It
You
is
know,
a
that's
whole-
what, presentations like this fool the public, because you can't really see. But this is the old-fashioned way of seeing what it's like.
It's what
Thickness of the book and all that's in it, so.
We have that digital as well if you want.
Thank you.
Digital. It includes 197 measures, as Lynette was saying, and we have a couple differences in here. We have the primary measures, which really just focus on department level items, but we found that as we were going through our data and cleaning it up, that some departments were measuring the exact same thing. So, for example, the Standards and Poor's bond rating. City Manager's Office was tracking it as well as Finance. So we decided, that's a pretty important measure to the city. So why don't we kind of give you a quick snapshot of how the city's doing, and we call those citywide measures, and there's 29 of them. So, and how do you read this report? As we were talking, there's
Glasses.
oh, glasses. Sorry. In the digital, you can zoom in a little bit more, but on the top, we really go into what are we doing? Why are we here? What are we in service to do? And that's our statement of service, or our statement of piercing clarity. So that's right across the top. It gives you kind of information on why are we measuring these? It's to fulfill our statement of service. The various perspectives that we were talking about, some measures are really catered towards what's the customer's benefit. Some are geared towards how does this involve the strategic areas that council's outlined. And some are really activities and workloads. And you've seen some of those workloads when we did the budget supplementals. The second line over, you'll see the indicators of success. What makes this successful? What makes this measure successful? Is it open meetings? Is it more transparency in government? What are the outcomes that we're looking for? Why are we measuring this? Third column over is just an internal number we use to track and make sure we're monitoring our measures, how many we have, and for tracking purposes. What the measure is. So the title of the measure is listed in that middle column, and you'll see that across the slides as we move forward. In the beginning of the year, each department went through and decided, what's our goal for this year? Do we want 100%? Do we think we can handle 1,000 cases? So we went through and we looked at what do we think our estimated workload will be, or what's our target, our ambitious targets for this year. So those are listed here under the targets and estimate. How often we report those targets and estimates, and a lot of those, a lot of the time we're reporting these, there's conversations going on about what did we do this month well, what did we
I have a
Yes,
question.
Molly, just kind of look at me
Thank you.
and get my attention here.
I have two questions. The slide before, the citywide measure, can you give me a sample of what a citywide measure is? I can understand a primary measure, but what is a citywide measure?
In a lot of the cases, a citywide measure is something that involves multiple departments, or it's a broad impact across the city. So the bond rating would be an example of a citywide measure that we felt was important to kind of pull that out and kind of highlight those measures. So it's a quick snapshot. I think another instance would be the recycling rate. We know council's asked a lot of questions about recycling, so we pulled that out to the front of the book so you can kind of get a quick snapshot of that.
So like for city clerk, she has two citywide measures. One would be elections, I'm assuming. What would the second be? I'm sorry.
We can look. I'll look.
I tried to find it before I asked my question.
It's
I couldn't-
okay.
I didn't know how to.
It's
So the city clerk, percent of council action requests turned in by deadline for processing, and percent of citywide compliance with records and information management guidelines.
Okay.
Those are two examples.
All right. So on the next slide, this slide, no, the next slide, I'm sorry, the slide we were just on, the city clerk, where would I find that indication that what I was looking at is one of those citywide?
So on page 9, it starts with the citywide measures, which are 29 measures. They're all tracked by the different departments, but they're pulled out to the front of the
Page
book.
9?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So you can see a list of those 29 measures right there, and it'll give you the information on, the perspective, the measure.
Holy cow. Wouldn't it have been simpler to put that under each of the categories?
Each of the
Oh,
You know,
and
like,
put it in.
oh, city clerk's office, and then somewhere in that have it. I mean, well, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of ease of looking at it.
We can put them in both places.
Yeah, we could put it in both places.
It's because I'm interested really in what each department does citywide versus their regular mission. I understand that, but citywide is important.
And that will be on this one page, and then we can duplicate it if you so like to each department. But it is here on this one page.
Okay, yeah, like on finance, would it just be stuck in finance somewhere on one of those pages? Like I'm looking at number, oh my gosh, I need a magnifying glass.
Yes.
Holy
It's all on the
Toledo.
right-hand side
I'm so
there.
sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm on 9, and I think it's number 95 in the third row.
Yep. Fund balance at 3
Fund
months.
balances, and it says finance. So under the tab of finance,
It's right in the citywide measures page. So the cover sheet.
no, I found this.
Yes.
So where would I find it in the finance section? How would I
You have
find
it
it?
in
Oh, it's
finance.
right in the citywide, so it's right up
You
front.
didn't put it in the finance section.
It's not
though, is what you're
duplicated.
saying.
We just put it in one
Okay,
place, but
all
we
right,
could put it
never
in
mind.
both places.
Okay, never mind. Okay.
It is in that first section here, right behind this.
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay.
I found that part, but as I'm going to go and look at every department, then I'm going to try to figure out what their citywide. I'll just read it here. Well, then you've got to see it
Well,
in the
then-
context of
Then
where it lasts.
Can we request on those personal examples of need
Yeah.
to have you print so many copies off that then she could have in the book? Would that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can put them in the department just as
We're
easy.
not going to let them copy it, not you. We'll
Okay.
have them
That'd be
do it.
great. Thanks.
Yeah, we can do that for
I'd
you.
like to see how they all fit in like that.
Yeah, and if that makes it easier understanding, then we should do it.
Yeah.
No problem.
It's our first year. We're constantly updating it and trying to make it as user friendly as possible.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, go.
Did
So-
you get the last?
No, I did not yet, no. So on the far right, you'll see a target status, and that kind of indicates we set a goal or initial workload or a target that we went out and established, and it kind of shows how close we were to that target. Did we get close to it? Did we exceed it? Did we hit it right on? We got our target. This indicator kind of displays that. Some are developing, like the elections. We won't get that data until March and November. So that's a developing one, and some are just informational. So that's how you read the cover sheets. And every department has a cover sheet that kind of explains what's included in that section, as well as a citywide section. It lists the measures that you're going to see, where they're being reported from, and it gives you how close we were to the target.
Joe?
Just an observation on the vote for the city clerk. I'm not sure, unless there's a strategy they know of that I don't, how you get 35% participation. I mean, we have an all mail-in ballot. I guess what I'm getting at is some of these,
The target is an
you know,
estimate.
I know, but some of these are actually goals and measures, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure how much we can really impact it. I guess is guess what I'm saying.
And sometimes it's more information. It's good to track. If, you know, we may put things in the newspaper to say, you know, the election's coming up, we give that information. Can the clerk really get people to the, you know, and mail in their ballots? No, but it's good to track it so we know where are we, how many, you know, where did we get? And it'd be great to see that increase over time. So it's more for information on that particular one.
Yeah, no, because I'm thinking it's very difficult. I mean, we've done about everything we can, all mail-in ballot, et cetera. How to get them there unless you physically go to the house and collect it while they're, yeah. So,
That was 24%, right?
right, it was pretty low.
24% the last election.
And as you'll see in some of these, the targets were very ambitious, and there's some explanation on either why we didn't meet the target or whether we need to adjust it. In some cases, we keep exceeding the target, so maybe it's time to up the target and give ourselves something more to go towards. So we're going to go through a couple. There are 197 measures, but we're not going through all those tonight.
Good.
We're just giving you an example of.
We finished by
these.
6, so I know. But you have a midnight read if you want to go through them. So just I'll kind of walk through how we read this. So every measure has its own page that gives a little bit more detail about the measure. So in this one, it's a citywide measure. We can see it's tracked out of the city manager's office, and it's an activity or workload. And it's tied to our fiscal and resource management and economic vitality. We're in the process right now of linking, because all these initiatives are intertwined, we're in the process of linking them all to your strategic focus areas, but we've only done that currently for the citywide. But our goal would be that by the next time you see us next year, we'll have them all linked for all 190 or however many measures we end up with. This measure is tracking the number of grant applications submitted citywide. And you can see we've begun to also link this to our priority-based budgeting. So you can see, if you read this chart, that in our quartile 1 programs, this performance measure links to one of the PBB programs. That is quartile 1.
So I think it's important to point out that any program that's in quartile 1 or 2, we want to see if there's a performance measure out there, because those are the ones that are actually driving the results that have been identified. So having a performance measure attached to that to determine are we doing this efficiently and effectively, or how well we are doing it, is important, because that's where we're putting our resources. So we want to make sure that we're measuring that.
And you'll see that the target set for this year was 20 grants submitted citywide. On page 9, you'll notice in the target indicator, though, that we did not meet our target, because we did go out and set a very ambitious target. But you'll notice that we submitted 18 this fiscal year, which is more than double the number we had submitted in 2011 and 2012. Yeah. So while we exceeded all of our previous years, we didn't meet our very ambitious target. And that's due to a lot of things. Our demographics don't necessarily facilitate us receiving some grants. So that's some of the analysis that's been discussed, and you'll see some of that down here in the comment section. So every quarter we're having discussions with our directors and our managers about what this measure is telling us, what's the story behind it, and what we should be doing to improve, or whether we're meeting our intended targets.
And I think that's good information for the council, because so many times when you're with other councils and they acquire these different grants, and you say to yourself, why? How come it wasn't us and they got it? And but this sort of pars it down to, and we will be able to see, I think, easily those that are not possible of ever acquiring. And so it familiarizes you with the.
And know that staff is looking into this and analyzing what this picture is saying. A picture tells a million stories, and we're looking at what that's telling us. Mm-hmm.
Sherry?
When we're talking about the targets, and I was just flipping through, some of them are pretty good, and some of them are just like you said, way off. And there's the comment section. Is that something for the next year you're going to go through and maybe put a footnote why you changed the target, why it went down or went up significantly? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Another measure, we discussed this one a couple minutes ago, and it's our standards and poors rating. And as many of you are aware, in February it went up from a AA- to a AA. So that was significant, and that impacts taxpayers, that impacts our interest rates. That impacts a lot of things. So it's tied to fiscal resource management, and it has 2 PBB programs in quartile 1 that it relates to, and 1 PBB program in quartile 2 that it relates to.
That was an impressive one.
So moving into department area, we're looking at fire here. It's the number of commercial and industrial occupancies inspected. And the target initially was set to be 1,000, but all of our volunteers weren't trained. So you can see the impact of volunteers. And this tells an amazing story about how our community has stepped up and assisted the city in meeting its goals. The last half of this fiscal year, we had our volunteers in place, and you can see that in just one half of the year, we met 75% of our target. So it'll be amazing to see what that turns out to be next year.
I think it'll be interesting to see if we hold that 1,000 as a target, as Councilmember Loretano was, mentioning. Do we revisit that? But the volunteers here have done an amazing job for us, and it'll be exciting to watch over the next year.
Well, I guess it's if you're looking at a realistic target or you're looking at an ambitious target. So do you give people less, or do you give them more to work and try to achieve
stretch.
that? So, I mean, there's that psychology between the two numbers of what you really want to do. Joe?
Also, the report I really enjoy getting from you is the number of hours that the volunteers put in and the dollar, because I know that's a significant part of our savings and a significant part of the city. It says a lot about our community, as many hours as our volunteer puts in. So is it fair to assume we'll be seeing probably something like that down the road? It would be nice to get that information, because I'm kind of proud as a city of the number of people that step up and volunteer their time for us. So.
Yes, as a city as a whole, as our volunteers, but also I think I do remember that you asked us to come back after this program was up and running for a while, and what the impact was of this particular program also. So there's a savings, dollar savings with this that comes with it. So definitely one we want to come back with some numbers for you.
In the human resources area, this is an interesting measure. It's preventable accidents per 1 million miles driven. And in analyzing this, I mean, one question is, why is this important? It's important because we want to lower injuries that our employees are experiencing. We want to have safe employees. We want to have safe citizens. So that's why we're measuring this. You'll notice we haven't linked it yet to PBB measures, but again, that's our goal this year, is to do that. In looking at the data, it was determined by human resources that this number was really high, and then it dropped all of a sudden. Well, why did it drop? In analyzing that, it was determined that the definition of preventable was not standardized.
Oh.
So when looking at the measures, you can determine that. And now there's a clear definition of what preventable is, and that is failure to control vehicle to avoid a collision. So now we actually have our baseline now of 13 per million miles. So as we move forward, we can actually benchmark it. So in doing this data cleanup and looking at what the data was telling you, you can find out, do we need to readjust what we're looking at, or what are we actually looking at? And we can determine, what can we do to prevent accidents? What programs do we need to initiate? Who's causing accidents? So this is just a high-level look at preventable accidents, but it begs you to ask more questions.
That's what's so great about the performance measures is there's something more that you can kind of explore in the discussions that you have around them. And, this also, keeping track of this saves citizens money, because when we have accidents, that costs money. So making sure we're staying on top of it is important.
Joanne?
I just want to make sure I'm reading, as I'm looking through all of these different pages, making sure I understand the way the tables are looking. So when you have on this slide target of 10, are we saying target of 10 accidents per million miles?
Yes.
But we actually had 13 accidents
Yes.
per million miles? Okay. And so just quickly, I'm looking at the parks acreage per capita per 1,000 population. And the target was, looks like three parks per 1,000, but we're only at a 2.8. Is that what I'm reading correctly?
Yes, and one thing, sometimes the targets are set because that's the industry standard, or that's the national, or that's our regional target. So sometimes they're set because of that. But in this instance, you'll notice that if we don't build any new parks in theory, as the population increases, that number will decline.
So as we take this kind of information, and we take it back to the CIP, and we take it back to the survey, as our whole little, charts all connect together, we then look at budget times, and we look to you as staff saying, okay, this is how this all lines up, and this is what we would propose to try to hit these targets in the next 10, 15, whatever years. Correct? That's how you're going to be circling back around. And of course it changes, but this is how it's going to all come together, circle around, and this is how you'll present it to us at budget times. Okay.
And it's just a piece of that data-driven decision making. You have many tools to do that. You have PBB, you have performance measures, you have citizen surveys. It's just one piece of the tools that you have.
And one of the examples that we did use this past budget year was workload indicators. And before we actually asked for a position to be funded, we had workload indicators that we needed to provide. So we did use some of the performance measures in order to support that request. So as we look and continue to work on this and broaden this, definitely the performance measures, the PBB, all of that comes together.
Over in municipal courts, this is a workload indicator, and it's number of cases processed by FTE. We have not linked that yet to PBB, but again, that will be in the works this year. And this is helpful because it's not just cases and it's not just employees, it's cases by employees. So it's tying two measures really together. So you can get a baseline for the amount of cases that employees can handle. And then if we have to come back for a budget season and request supplementals, this is a good example of one you might say, you know what, right now we're fine, or right now we're swamped. You can see that.
So would this sort of give us an idea, when the judge comes always and he gives the caseloads and he gives this, his report of what he's done. In actuality, we will have some of this information by tracking this.
You could have that by employee.
You hear that, Wally? Because you're always
I'm always
you're always tracking the courts.
Yeah.
So right here, you've got it.
Mm-hmm.
And by their employees. So we know, you can kind of see how many cases an employee can, what they can handle. And as we start to see maybe sharp increases, can employees handle a little bit more? You're going to start to see where things start to slide. And that's why it's important to provide the data when we bring the information forward. And
you can see that across the fiscal year, the caseload was below what the anticipated workload was, but you can see that there's a couple months here where it increased above that significantly. So you can see the variation as well across the fiscal year. And if you're looking at this measure, you can also look at other measures that are included in the packet to see, did this spike increase, did this change something somewhere else? Did it impact other levels of service? So a lot of these measures do correlate with one another. Into police, you can see this is one where the target was, it's a customer benefit. It's average priority 1 response time. It's linked to 2 PBB quartile 2 programs. And after looking at this data, their target's going to change for next year. They're consistently below the target of 7 minutes. So next year, that target's going to drop. That discussion has taken place. And a part of the reason why our response times are so low, which isn't a great thing, is that there's a minimum of 5 officers that are on patrol. And it's different types of officers as well, whether that be traffic unit or detectives or K-9 officers. There's multiple officers on patrol. So that is contributing to a decrease in response time. And this is a great measure because if the time increases, it helps with determining if there's a red flag indicator or you can indicate if there's staffing issues as well. So it's a customer benefit, but you can also see if with workloads management as well.
Sherilyn?
When we attended the dinner with the fire chief last week, that was the one thing consistently spoken about. Both fire, of course, whenever in our customers' minds, fire and police are absolutely linked, and they were so very flattering about the response times. So that's very something that not only are we looking at, but with outside they're looking in as well, because that's what affects them personally.
And that's why we have this under the customer benefit, because it really is about making sure we're meeting those what they're interested in. So.
And I just thought it was interesting because that just came out in conversation while we were talking to our citizens.
Thank you.
Another citywide one, which is from the Environmental Services Division of Public Works. It's recycling diversion rate. And this one actually got put into citywide because I've heard you guys talk about recycling. And
So are the people when we go to the stores and they stop us and talk. They talk about recycling. There's always questions.
So this target is set high, but they're challenging themselves to do this. The regional average or target for recycling is actually 18%. So you can see that while we haven't met our internal goal of 25%, we are well above the regional target of 18%. And you can see also even seasonal variability in that December we had a higher rate. It's because a lot of wrapping paper went into the recycle bins. But so there's a story to every one of these little bars and charts. It's kind of neat.
I'm sorry, where did you say you see regionally it's 18? I don't.
It's not on this slide, but that's just some information. We've increased our target because we want to challenge ourselves, and we know that we're exceeding that regional target of 18%. Another one from Environmental Service is the number of residential refuse collection accounts. This is trending up as our population in Goodyear is growing, and you can see every year it's consistently gone up. But it's an activity and it's a workload. When we have the bulk trash collection days, this is going to be a big determining factor of how many accounts we're having to go by different households and pick up the bulk trash. So in a couple of years, we'll be able to see how much our staff can handle. So again, looking at the data, looking back at how many staff members you had in a particular year, looking at service delivery, and so it's a customer benefit as well. But it's really looking at a workload in this perspective, and it's tied to one PBB program in quartile 2.
We have not given you all 197. That was just
Thank you.
our teaser for you tonight. So give you an
all
idea.
right here,
Yeah,
right?
it's all right there.
Now you can sit by the fireplace and read through this beautiful document.
Okay.
So, in addition to just our city stat performance measures, we've included the CPM 101 data, which is from the ICMA. So if you look in your book, after you get through the data and statistical tables, you do have the ICMA data, and that benchmarks us against other communities.
And excuse me one second, Mayor. Can you explain what ICMA is for the public? International City County Managers Association. So they spend a lot of time trying to look at benchmarks and how we compare to each other, and it's always a work in progress as well. But it is nationally recognized.
Joanne?
I'm curious, how you've linked these performance measures to the priority-based budgeting, or some of them are in the process of being linked. Other cities that have gone over to priority-based budgeting, are they doing this also? Are we the new ones, or is this kind of the suggested thing to do from, I forget the name of the group that does it.
Priority-based budgeting.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that one. Have is this our own thing, or have they suggested this?
They have suggested it. I don't know of other organizations that actually have done it. They are the ones that said if you've got a quartile 1 or 2 program where you're putting a lot of your resources, you really should be measuring it, and to determine if you're doing it effectively and efficiently and meeting the targets that you've set. So we have taken that step. I can't answer as to other organizations that have actually completed it, but we have begun that process.
Well, it came on just recently on the LinkedIn group that I belong with National League of Cities, that priority-based budgeting was coming up as topics of discussion in other cities that are doing it. So, of course, I had to throw in that we were doing it, Oh, very good. Thank you.
And on that,
Excuse me, go ahead. Finish.
And on that theme of multiple ways of looking at this, I know it's a big chunky book, but there's multiple ways to look at it. On the actual slide with the performance measure, you can see just simply how many quartile 1 and quartile 2 programs are. But if you want to really drill down into that, there's the PBB section. You can go in, see our list of PBB programs, and look at it reverse. This is the PBB program, and what performance measures is it linked to? So we wanted to, there's multiple audiences of this document, so we want to make sure that there's multiple ways to look at it.
Sherry?
Yes, I had a question on the ICMA and just flipping through it. The benchmarks, it just says benchmark communities and it says number of communities. Are those our specific ones that we've always kind of benchmarked to, or is that just in general? Are they local? Where do those come from?
They're across the country, and they're in this particular data set. As we move forward, they're moving to a different system called ICMA Insights, and there's going to be a more availability of data. So that the communities that we're benchmarking to in this particular report might be more detailed communities and more data.
Okay, just if we start reading this, we don't start taking things out of context. And those aren't the Buckeyes, the
and
ones
some
we
of
always.
these cities are large, some of them are small. So in that, you'll see the mean size of those communities and the averages. So so you kind of have an idea, and then you can also see if we're within or out of that standard deviation of the responses that are given.
But I do want to say that we're taking it one step further, and this is my opportunity to talk about the Valley benchmarking cities. While we are comparing through CPM 101 and ICMA across the country, we have joined a group of individuals, and we're supported by ASU and Alliance for Innovation. And we've been meeting for a year. We're kind of the small community. We're out there with the big dogs. Thanks to Mr. Dahlke, he got us a seat at the table, and it's all of the other big cities in the valley. And we have been working over the past year as to what we would like to measure. And going forward this next year, we've identified some things that we really want to work on and get more specific in some of the measures. So Christian and I attend that meeting once a month, and we're very excited about our opportunity to compare locally.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. That's why, so we're not starting to say, oh, we're really bad or we're really good, and we're not misreading the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's in any performance measure system, sometimes there is a fear of the data, but it's really putting it in context. And I think that's why staff is going through it, commenting on it, and asking those why questions. Why does this matter? What's going on in our circumstance? Are we doing better or worse? But in context to what? So there's a lot. It's looking at the picture behind that data.
Excuse me.
Okay, year one is under our belt. We're looking at year two. We've learned a lot. We've learned that we don't need to fear performance measures, that they're exciting and that they give us more information and we can make better decisions from them. We've also learned that our process is pretty weighty and we could slim down a little bit on some of the things we do and the measures that we actually track. So we'll be looking at what we actually are tracking. And when we have lean up there, we are implementing lean processes in the city, and some of that has to do with our performance measures and looking at how we're doing that and how many we're measuring and making sure that they're meaningful. Because at the end of the day, what will help the most is when an employee can say, I do this and it connects to this and it connects to this and it connects to this, and this is how well I'm doing it. And we want to make sure there's that direct connection all the way up and down. So we're still working on a lot of them, and when you have 197 measures, that's hard to kind of focus on any particular one. So picking out a few and really focusing on those important ones will be something we'll be working on over the next year. But we've had tremendous support from the directors, from this team. It's been a fun process, and I want to compliment Christian and his team. He has been an excellent leader in this process and put together a great team, and I just can't wait for the next year and to see what comes out of that. And this is a little summary of what we've got coming up over the next year and what they'll be working on, finishing the linking of the quartile programs, process mapping, and working on refining the measures, as I mentioned. So that is it.
Thank you. That was a good presentation. Comments from the council? Joe?
Again, being familiar with somewhat of the area that you're dealing with, I really appreciate the time and that the team's put into here, and I think it's really going to pay off during the budget process when you figure out exactly whether the dollars being spent is getting the results. Because in today's new economy, I like to call it, the money doesn't flow like it did when I was here back in 08 and 07. You're going to have to find ways of kind of reshuffling some of those resources to meet the demands of our citizens. So the fact that you have this data, you'll know where some of that possibly may be able to be shifted, and those indicators on when we need more help. So again, I appreciate the effort. I know there's a lot of hours in coming up with this, and there's a lot of hours in identifying all these costs and setting it up so you can use this data in the future. So again, thanks to all the staff and everybody who's worked on this.
Jerry?
I think this is absolutely a great document, and thank you for everyone that worked on it. There's so much information here, and I was wondering if it's okay as we go through it, if we have questions about some of the, where we got the benchmarks, how we got what we're going to do, if we could go through those without like pinning you on each single page, all 900, 190 some. But thank you so much.
Joanne?
Well, Brian, this was one of the things that we gave you as a benchmark a couple of years ago of saying we want to see measurements and we want to see how they're being performed, and you did it. And so thank you. Good job. And well, of course, we know you gave the direction to. Thank you, guys.
Any other comments? No, it is, this society is data-driven. And when you can confirm information and you have the facts behind it, and it's understandable, it's certainly going to help. So thanks, and the team, it was a great team. I look at all the names and see all the hard work they did. But I think the work is definitely worth it. And I think refining it is going to make it probably somewhat easier, because it was a very lofty, lofty goal. But you've achieved a great deal. Thank you. Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. I'm welcoming Councilman Stipp. He is in the room now. But at this point, we're finished with our work session. So we're going to adjourn it and go into the regular meeting. We have 15 minutes, so enjoy a short break. Meeting adjourned.
You're going to jump up and run around on that, but.